The recording, oh, I'll leave it to you. Thank you.
Um,
Now, what was the rule that you implemented?
well, what I'm trying to encourage is that we be gentle with each other because I want people to be gentle with me, and the only way I know how to do that is to encourage it as a shared behavior, if that makes sense. Um, what I was going to suggest, Lino, is that you take a look at the recording of the meeting and then see how you think it went and notice some of the stuff that goes on. Still backwards, Tom. It's Mooz. Is everybody else seeing it that way?
Yeah,
Yeah, he just needs to mirror his image.
Yeah, that's what he
Okay.
said. I thought he was going to do that.
Go into video, click on the up
I
arrow.
mirror my video this way.
It should look backwards on your screen. Is this one coming through
that's coming through
correctly?
beautifully.
Yeah, okay.
Correct.
On my screen, it looks backwards.
Okay, on mine, this looks backwards.
It does? Huh,
Yes.
that's strange. I don't know why mine would do it opposite from yours.
Okay. Well, because I have an old computer. Okay. So Mooz, and I'll flip it. And now I see it as saying Zoom.
It hasn't changed.
It's still backwards for us.
You need to read the book.
Ha! Tom, go into up on the up arrow in video.
Yeah.
Go into what they say. What do they call that? Go into the up arrow and go into choose virtual background.
Huh,
And at the bottom, it should say, I have a green screen, and it should say mirror my video.
Okay. Let's see here. Video.
Oh, and perhaps then we'll even be able to read your T-shirt.
Background.
maybe.
Oh, I have two. Okay, I don't have a virtual background. I have a real background. I don't have the horsepower to do a virtual background here. I will try changing mirror my video here. It flipped me around.
No, it didn't.
Nope.
Your book and your T-shirt are still both backwards.
Okay, so clicking mirror. I can read my T-shirt. I can read the book.
Yeah. We can't. They're both backwards to us.
Why is it?
Go into the TV, you click
Yeah.
on the up arrow, and go up to where it says blur my background, choose virtual background, choose virtual video
Yeah.
filter, and click choose virtual background.
Okay.
And on the left, it should say general, video, audio, share screen, team chat, Zoom apps, and so forth.
Video, virtual backgrounds, avatars, video filters, studio effects. Create virtual backgrounds with AI companion. No, thank you. I have a green screen. No, I don't, but I'll select it.
Then it should say mirror my video
And it says,
at the bottom.
okay, now I got to go up, and it says mirror my video, and so that is checked. So I'll uncheck it, and it reverses me.
Yes. Now put your book up.
He's
No.
still mirrored his backwards.
Perhaps you have to both implement it and then turn it on.
Isn't mirroring just a setting in the videos?
Yeah,
That's
That's what
what
he's
we're
trying to play
trying
with.
to accomplish.
that's what I'm trying to get to work. But anyway, we've spent enough time. The book, it's a dummies book, Zoom for Dummies.
Boy, I
Uh,
need that.
Okay,
yeah,
this is the switch right here. You see what my book is doing?
yeah, I understand. I understand.
It just
I
doesn't work on his computer.
It doesn't. It is either my computer or my Zoom or some part of the.
Is your camera built into your computer or are you
Yep.
using a separate one?
This is built into the laptop. I'm beginning to think it's time to get a new laptop.
Did you find the button on the video?
Yeah, I
setting?
found. I have found 3 places where I can choose to mirror my video, and when I click on them, it mirrors my video on my own screen.
Oh,
But it doesn't appear to get to you people. Here, I'm flipping it back and forth.
huh.
Now,
That
Which
must be-
version of Zoom are you using?
Yeah, it must be a Zoom function.
Oh God, the most up-to-date one that's available for this PC.
Interesting. Okay, because I just had them up, I upgraded because stuff
Yeah.
was not working. And
Yeah.
the new version has all kinds of new features and it works a lot better.
Well,
But
this is a very old PC, and I suspect they're probably throttling it. I'm not going to fight with it.
Yeah.
We can go on and do other things.
Okay. Do we have any random bits?
Yeah. It now says low system resources will affect your video and audio quality. Try closing applications, and the only application open is Zoom.
yeah, well, turn off the green screen thing that you implemented.
Let's try. I don't have a green screen, but I'll.
I thought you said you had checked it.
No, I had checked it because someone wanted me to do that, but
No, I didn't mean I when I
no,
said
that next topic.
Jason appears to be trying to say something.
Yep.
Somebody
J-
call on him? Or-
Yeah. Yeah, he's muted, but if he unmutes.
Tom, you want to call on people for me?
Okay.
Mute myself. I've just been quietly, patiently waiting my turn because I was foolishly under the impression that this was like random bits and not technical
Go ahead,
support.
Jason. Let's not complain. Let's just do it.
Okay, well, one thing of interest is I just read this morning in a newspaper article that they believe that the prevailing winds are shifting from the poles, which is important because that's wrapped up in tidal currents, and we don't want to plunge Western Europe into the next ice age, which happens to do when the North Atlantic currents shift and all that good stuff. They think it's due to climate change, but then again, these scientists think everything is due to climate change. So they don't really know. They're just guessing. They didn't offer any credible evidence. They actually, they freely admit that they don't know, but their first guess is climate change. Well, that might be. I mean, I'm not saying it's not, but that's not really scientific. Anyway, it turns out that Viktor Orban, the Hungarian prime minister in the EU, in Eastern Europe, is threatening to bus illegal, not legal, they're all for illegal immigration, not illegal, illegal immigrants on their southern Serbian border to Brussels, which I think. I'm sorry, just have a radio. Anyway, they're threatening to bus thousands upon thousands, probably, of illegal migrants to Brussels because the EU has been it's been playing rather dirty pool in terms of, cracking the whip on poor old Hungary. And they've frozen hundreds of millions of dollars in assets. And it doesn't, you'd think that sovereign nations within Europe would be allowed to make their own policy decisions, but I'm starting to understand why Britain decided to leave the European Union over precisely this issue, because now Hungary is being persecuted by the EU. And I will post a link. Also, I've already posted a couple of links. I'm going by state to prove that state by state, there are newspaper articles showing that there are thousands upon thousands of unregistered voters. I mean, not unregistered voters, but non-citizens, meaning people who have not gained U.S. citizenship, that somehow mysteriously ended up on the voting register, despite certain political factions.
People
I
need
don't
to
think
mute
you are
themselves.
supposed to be involved today because it's not your turn.
No,
Whoever
it's
is
just
talking.
background noise, Jason. Go ahead. Someone needs to
Anyway,
mute themselves.
I'm posting links state by state showing that there are thousands of non-U.S. citizens registered to vote in each state, and in swing states where, they're not decided, 7, 8, 10,000 non-citizens voting and being registered to vote. How the hell did they even get registered to vote in the first place is my first question. And second of all, why are non-citizens voting? I mean, why are they allowed to vote? And does this not reinforce what Black people interviewed on the street have said dozens of times, that it's an insult to think that they are incapable of getting a driver's license or identification if they want to vote? Like, white people claim that it's racist and oppressive, but Black people find white people who say that to be an insult to their intelligence and their competency. So, and I could post clips to videos of a whole bunch of normal Black people on the street saying that, white liberals, defending the poor old Black man, that's an insult to them, and they take it as such, that they are more offended than the
What
Black people.
happened to our 2-minute rule?
So I'm posting these links to prove that there are tens of thousands of non-citizens that are registered to vote, and I will be doing that. So look for the comments below. Thank you.
Go ahead, Tom.
To respond to Jason, it's a feature of the immigration involvement that I forget this happened. This is not something new. 10, 15, 20 years ago, immigrants were, as part of their intake, were registered to vote. Now, I don't know which administration did this or what the thinking was, or the feeling was, that it would make them feel accepted. And some people tried to stop it, and the court said, no, the government can do this.
Actually, rules of our government.
No, Jason, the government doesn't have to follow its own rules.
Non-citizens are not allowed to vote under. I mean, this is what conservatives are complaining about.
It is what it is.
But they say conservatives don't have a valid point when they point this out, that they're smoke and mirrors, that they're just gaslighting. They pretend like it doesn't exist, that it's not a thing.
Yep, that's what they do.
So then the liberals are wrong.
Yeah.
They're liberals.
I mean, we should acknowledge this if we want to be intellectually honest. I know there's no honor in mainstream media.
Okay,
yeah,
can we move on
Next.
now? Okay, a couple things about Hungary. Hungary basically has sided with Russia as far as policies, and or Viktor Orban is very pro-Putin, and the NATO rightly regards Putin as a threat to them, and that's why they're doing sanctions against Hungary. Okay, but I just wanted to respond to that. The other thing is I have another random bit, and it has to do with new computer model, supercomputer. There's a supercomputer network being developed that can increasingly precisely model local effects due to climate change. And it's been pretty successful so far. They can get it down to about a 25 square kilometer area currently.
You're not able to get in?
They can get it down to more like a neighborhood area once this network is up and running better. So, for example, the extra heating of the atmosphere or the oceans or whatever. Stan, could you please mute yourself when you're on the phone?
I'm sorry, I'm talking to Doug Shoemaker. He's trying to get it.
Thank you. I sent him to you because I'm not able to do three things at the same time. Tom, would you be willing to put that a link to that network?
Well, it's a small article in the current Scientific American. So I can't link it specifically.
Right.
It's unless there's an online version that has those links. It's called Zeroing In. So it's interesting.
Reference the issue of Scientific American and the article name.
Okay.
So we could go back and follow up on it if we want to, which I would kind of like to. But I know I won't have time to write it down.
Yeah. And I can't believe there are still climate change deniers, but there are apparently.
Oh, absolutely. Even some who have some.
I mean, back in the 70s or even earlier, the scientists of Exxon wrote papers saying that what Exxon is doing affects the climate, and Exxon itself responded by denigrating the science itself. So
Yep.
That's been going on for a long time.
It has.
Lino, you're next.
Thank you. Regarding immigration, I'm going to make a prediction and I'm going to talk about kind of a personal perspective on it. I think that immigration, one of the conditions that will be established is people will have to speak and write English to get across the border, and you'll have to prove ahead of time that you can do so. And you have to have a skilled worker kind of a thing. And I think that those will be conditions of permitting immigration. Anyway, other conditions I'm not going to talk about. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. You are suggesting that that be implemented as a rule?
Yes, because I think that people in foreign countries, this is a surmise, could use a phone to learn English, to take their examinations, to read and write, or an internet connection. And that while they're at home, that they can do that, and they need to do that before they hit the road. And, you know, I don't know what else you can say, but if they're leaving the country and they're coming to the United States to work, and they can speak the language and you know, I personally, I guess, am really open to that. So, but I don't want to have to get to personal opinion. But thank you for letting me share. In terms of climate change, by the way, we conflate stuff. I think that anybody who looks at the facts, the scientific facts, can't dispute that the climate's changing, glaciers are melting and so forth. what's at stake is do humans cause it or not? And that's where the rub, and we conflate those two. And yes, the climate's changing. Are human causing it? No, it's other factors in my estimation, and perhaps Jason's. Anyway, those are two hot issues for me. Thank you for sharing your end, and thank you for letting me share mine.
Well, I guess
Okay.
it's my turn. I've got my hand. I'd just like to quickly,
Okay.
go on the record to state that I do not consider myself a climate change denier. I actually believe in the integrity of science, and believe in the integrity of science, and to be intellectually honest, you have to follow the scientific process. And we all know, and we've all heard that there is widespread um, academic shenanigans going on in terms of falsified research.
More like
And
corporate shenanigans. Yeah.
I get suspicious every time I hear a bunch of unsubstantiated claims, and I don't believe that's science. I don't believe that wild guesses and speculation could count as valid science. I believe that extraordinary claims requires extraordinary evidence. And let's be honest here. I do acknowledge the possibility that this is human caused, or like I said, it could be other natural geological functions, or could more likely the case, it could be a combination of the two. But we still need to follow the scientific process, and we need to be judicious and a little bit more skeptical. That doesn't mean that we should sit on our hands, but you know, I drink the same water and breathe the same air as everybody else. I have a stake in this too, so I'm not. I take offense to. I, I'm I think that if somebody would, I think a lot of what counts as climate deniers is people who just don't fully drink the Kool-Aid. I think that if you're not fully on board with it, then you're mislabeled a climate change denier or some other boogeyman. You know, we've gone. History has shown throughout the human species that by just immediately jumping on the bandwagon and immediately jumping to conclusions, we've got a history that shows that we've been wrong in the past about climate change, that we've been wildly off on our previous assumptions. So, you know, let's take a step back, take a breath, and like not rush foolishly. You know, let's follow let's respect
Okay,
the
we have 1 more minute. Carrie, why don't you finish up?
Sure, real quick. You guys need to schedule something on climate change, obviously.
I think we have in the past, but maybe we're redue for something.
Due for another one.
We have at least, or we had, I guess we've lost the one person that I didn't recognize. Sorry about that. We had one person with us.
Did we explain that we're doing random bits in the presentations at 10?
No, we hadn't gotten that far. I think we were in the middle of having equipment problems. And I see that, wait a minute. I've admitted Warren Poole twice. And
He's back.
do it again, I guess.
He's on.
Okay, good. I wanted anybody who wasn't normally with us to have a chance to introduce themselves to the group if they wanted to. And then I wanted to run a couple of things by people before I started the actual presentation.
Okay, go ahead.
Jason, you've still got your hand up, is that right?
We're done with random bits.
I'll put my hand down, but say that today's discussion is going to be very interesting, if not outright entertaining.
Probably.
Okay, let's get on with it then.
I'm afraid. I'm not quite sure how easy it's going to be to manage the showing the videos. But
What were the points you wanted to mention before you start?
I would like people to consider whether we could manage to do perhaps a book group where we would read the book and then talk about it. In particular, there are a couple of books that I'm familiar with that I think might be useful as background for our discussions. One is Ingredients, subtitled something like What We Put in Our Mouths and Put on Our Bodies. It has some very interesting things to say about public health and types of diseases and how difficult it is to actually attribute what causes cancer, what causes heart disease, and how the statistics of life expectancy work. I think it would be useful background for us all to be exposed to. Don't know that we can actually do a reasonable presentation on it. My guess is that you could do a master's thesis on it, but we don't have that kind of time. And the other thing is we've been talking about wanting to meet together, a hybrid meeting instead of just a Zoom meeting. And it's possible that we could start out with a book group discussion. I just wanted to run that by the group and see what you think of it. And some of you have not gotten back to me in terms of my list of meeting attenders as to whether you wanted to be listed and whether you wanted what information we have about you to be publicized among the group.
David, we're ready for your presentation.
And you're muted.
Yeah, now you're muted. Okay.
What is it? 3 or 4 months ago, I saw this video that I thought was extremely interesting, that I thought would make a good topic for discussion. Larry Loftus, is a political science professor at Harvard, and he did a TED Talk about, among other things, our government is not particularly responsive to individual citizens. I thought it might be worth watching and talking about. So I will try and show it. It says here, if you violently want to say something in the middle of his presentation, raise your hand and I will try and watch people well enough to see and stop it at the time. Yep. Okay, if everybody's ready, I will try and show this 20-minute video. How many of you agree with me that this was worth watching? The people I can see pretty consistently. Thank you.
Chris had his hand up first and then he walked away. Oh, he's back. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, I agree with much of what this gentleman said, but one possible question I have, and I don't have the answers, but I'm good at questions. One possible question I have is that would the outcomes necessarily be better if we implemented what he said? And I say that because the average voter is not qualified to make policy decisions. The average voter is not informed well enough to make policy decisions. The founding fathers didn't let everybody vote. They wanted to have people vote who had skin in the game, who were educated, and who had the good of society as the outcome. If you look at, let me finish. At least that was the theory.
Exactly. That was all I was going to say. They told a good story.
Right. But it was definitely people who had the capability to analyze the situation and understand the policy implications of what they were doing. If you look at California, where they have referendums and let all the people decide, the outcomes are not necessarily great.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure that his suggestion is a panacea, and I'm not sure that the outcomes would necessarily be better. But he's entirely right about the corrupt system. But would the outcomes be better?
And that question has been a question for the last at least 2,000 years, since we talked about Greek democracy. Is it better? Well, we're not sure, but it's easier to live under. We think it has the possibility of being better.
It wouldn't be easier to live under if it was significantly worse.
And it's distinctly possible. I think the feeling on the part of a lot of people in this country is that our children probably will not have as good a life as we had.
Agreed.
It's going to get more and more difficult.
That's not just the result of our political system, it's the result of worldwide global forces.
Which we have been the first among equals, or the global superpower. In, 1992, when the Soviet Union broke up peacefully, we were essentially the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room for at least 10 years.
Stan, are we recording this?
Oh, no. I meant to do that. I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes, we are recording this. And I recorded the whole video, which I wasn't supposed to do.
Okay, if you're done, Carrie's next.
Okay. Yeah, I think if you're gonna try to structure things, the question is who decides who decides. Right? That's really the issue. Because yeah, there's a ton of ways you can structure this stuff. You can say on one hand, we've got the best government money can buy, and I think that's an accurate statement. And we can argue that there's a certain utility to that or efficiency if you value productivity. We could also say, hey, only landowners get to vote, right? Because if you run an apartment complex where the owner gets one vote and the tenants all get a vote, you've got that, two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner or who. There is a fantastic book that's on this topic that kind of is a restructuring of our thoughts of how this stuff works, called The Dictator's Handbook. Highly recommended. The section on foreign policy is chilling. Yeah. And I wonder, you hear a lot of talk these days about democracy, our democracy, and I wonder if really the power or the feature of democracy is just that it tends to be somewhat decentralized, so it's a little more resistant to being dominated by special interests, but special interests have an interest in figuring out how to dominate, and they're real good at that. And I think that's kind of the take home from Dictator's Handbook is the more you can distribute the people who are necessary to make happy, the more representative your system is going to be. And then last thing, the thing about the American dream, I mean, this was really kind of crystallized in the 50s, which was a real anomalous time. And yeah, that thing is dead in the water, I think, as far as for generations moving forward. It's going to be a different challenge for them, unfortunately, and people need to realign their expectations.
Well, I think the expectations are that we are running into some limits to growth. The book was written, Limits to Growth was written in 1972. That's 50 years ago.
How does that relate to our political system?
Is the government that we have favoring the people in general or the special interests? We talk about the wisdom of the crowd. As I understand it, that had to do with being able to guess the weight of a bull or the number of jelly beans in a jar, other such state fair kinds of sampling. And any individual guess wasn't very accurate, but the average was very close.
You can also look at the monetary system, which is designed to supercharge growth. And if you're running into limits of resources, you've got the immovable object and the unstoppable force. There's going to be a problem. And I think we're starting to see the beginnings of that with inflation.
Well, that's what Limits to Growth suggested 50 years ago, was that there were 3 or 4 different problems, any of which could stop that growth. Pollution, resource availability, energy availability, innovation. Any of those are possible showstoppers. And the prediction was business as usual would get us into trouble just about now, sometime in the next 5 years, 10 years.
And I would argue, independently of your feelings on the cause of climate change, these carbon limit systems that are being proposed are a proxy for industrial production. And really, that's what you're talking about doing too, is you're talking about limiting growth as well as a way to address the issue, just a different way to come at the problem.
Who's next?
Jason.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Thank you for being patient. We are not a democracy. We are not a democracy. We are a to the republic for which it stands. We are a representative republic, and there are very damn good reasons for that. people like Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson spoke at length. Have you guys not studied your early American history or poli-science,
Hey,
political science?
Jason, could you please make a point without insulting people?
Okay, let me make this point very clear. There is a reason why there are no direct democracies out there, okay, and that they are representative democracies because even today, and people make the argument that, oh, we had the printing press back then and we didn't have the types of mass communication we have now. The public is increasingly becoming awake and aware that all sorts of, even the mass media we have today, the mainstream media, misleads and flat outright lies to us all the time. We still, as a general people, do not have the intelligence, the capacity, nor would it be a good idea for average citizens to make policy. Okay, we should not we need elected leaders to make policy decisions for us, even if they don't always do a good job. I think the pushback here is that a lot of people have grown up their whole lives and they're disgusted that a lot of things that should change don't change, and that the government repeatedly fails the people time and time again, and they don't see the change that should be happening or is needed happening because the government doesn't do as good a job as what we want. So I think ultimately is you could try to tweak the system, but the problem is not that the government isn't delivering. The problem is that we shouldn't be putting our faith and trust in the government to solve these problems in the first place. The government never was going to be our savior, and it never can be our savior. Government cannot solve the problems that you're looking for it to solve because government is always the lesser of the evils. It is not people who put their faith in the government to solve whether it's environmental problems or any other kind of problems. This is the fundamental difference between political ideologies. One group of people realizes that government has never been the solution and never can be the solution, no matter what you implement. And then the other side, although they gripe about it all day long, they don't realize that they think that the government can be the solution to all their problems if we just get it right, if we just tweak it this way, if we just make these changes, then it'll be different. No. When people on a wide enough scale realize that government cannot be the solution to these problems they're looking for, and that the structure inherently, we opened a Pandora's box by tweaking this. We've got the best government.
Saying the poor we will always have with us.
Corporations aren't inherently evil. They could do evil things. It's like a gun. Guns aren't inherently evil. It's how you use them. And so, yes, there are always going to be winners and losers in government. That's why you shouldn't look to government to be your savior, because you should always, governments, we've got all of human history to prove this. So there's that.
So you're saying that we shouldn't worry about this because it's normal.
Yeah, I mean, as far as governments go, we've got the best one.
We can argue with that.
We've got the best government ever in human history. Why do you think everybody else on the planet wants to come here? I mean,
I don't think so.
It's still got a bunch of crappy problems, but government itself is inefficient and crappy. That's why you should never trust your government, and you should never put your full faith and heart in your government, because your government will always find ways to let you down, no matter how you tweak it, no matter who runs it.
Okay.
People
Maybe right, but if you are, we don't need to have this discussion. If I understand the Harvard professor correctly, and I think he's an excellent teacher, he certainly does a good presentation anyway. If I understand him right, he says we're missing one of the feedback mechanisms between the population and the government. It just isn't there. If we had it, we might be able to do a better job addressing problems like climate change, problems like inequality, economic inequality.
Economic inequality is a drive of innovation. Economic inequality. Economic inequality, you could make it moral and ethical case that economic inequality is a good thing.
Oh, we have 5 other hands up. We should let other people speak.
You want to take your hand down, Jason? Who's
Okay,
next?
I just wanted to say someone earlier said it's people who have skin in the game who should have the power to determine policy and vote and all that. Well, I would submit that everyone has skin in their game. They have their lives, their well-being, being able to put enough food on the table and that kind of stuff. They should all have a say in being able to improve their own lives, if nothing else. And our current system is tending more and more toward power toward the well-off. And even though they probably know a little more about what's going on, economically at least, they tend to be short-sighted as far as improving their own situation too. I mean, they want wealth now, wealth and power now, but not necessarily looking forward to considering the idea that maybe a rising tide raises all boats. So I think the idea of our democratic republic is that all men are created equal according to the Constitution, and that leaves out women, but I think that that's changed. All adults at least should be considered created equal. And I think that it's important that the people who are not well off have some feeling that they can affect their own future.
Okay, I'm the one who said everybody should have skin in the game, or people should have skin in the game. The problem is, what if people who don't have much vote for communism and want to take all the money from the people, the rich? Tyranny of the majority, which is there are always going to be more people. Probably it would be nice if this isn't the case, but so far there's always more people with less money than with more, and they could always vote. They don't have as much skin as the game as people who they do have their lives in the game, but they don't have as much skin in the game as people who have something. And they could easily vote just to take away from the people who have something and take it away with not based on merit or anything. And then in which case, ultimately, it might be worse for everybody.
It's a balance. It's hard to strike the right balance.
There's a balance.
But I think it's gone a little too far in one direction at this point. And
could be the
that's
case.
Exacerbating the social upheaval that we're beginning to experience.
Good points.
Tom, go ahead. Tom. Okay, you're muted, Tom.
I put a recommendation in the book chat for a book called Islandia. It was written by a law professor a century ago. It's a utopia. Young American kid meets a stranger, gets appointed to be a consul to this strange, isolated country, and he goes there. It's a different world, almost. I mean, it's on our planet, obviously, but maybe it's not so obvious. Place that runs by very different rules. Kind of a little bit like what we are, but not a whole lot different. He gets repeatedly from very beginning to the end, he is besieged by strange ideas. Islandia is a country that runs on different principles than ours does. I don't know that they're necessarily better principles. There are certainly problems that he discovers. But he learns to trust himself. And that's something that not many people do. People want to be part of the herd. And they want to think they can direct the herd. And the herd is only going to trample them. The idea of having skin in the game is from someone in the Federalist Papers, I forget who, saying that voters should only be those who have to pay taxes on their property. They will vote for good things, but they're not going to vote to be foolishly spending money on other things. And we have changed in this country to a point where politicians on both sides are claiming that they are saving our democracy. So the statement that we are not a democracy is a non-starter. This is what the population wants. This is what the politicians appeal to. And we're doomed. We really are. We have seen Bob, that's how many democracies survived more than a century?
How many nation states at all?
We're one of the oldest. Britain, France, Italy, China. Has China survived? It keeps having revolutions. I forget that there's an island nation in the Pacific that's had a monarchy that's been around for like 500 years. I forget which one it is. They don't like Americans. It's very difficult to get permission to visit there. It's possible, but if they don't have an airport for one thing, so you have to actually have a boat and sail there or a motor over there. But they don't like Americans. Well, no, they like Americans, but they hate our politics. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Islandia is 1,000 pages. It'll take you a month to read it. It'll stretch your mind.
Okay, Stan.
I think that the idea of worrying about the poor dominating their culture kind of talks, you have to kind of get to the idea of what it is that means to be wealthy and how you got the wealth that you have. This idea that we talk about poverty, how to eliminate poverty and so forth, I think it's sort of a reversed notion of survival or whatever it is that we do. What we need to do is actually kind of trace back to how it is that we achieved wealth. And I can only make that point of view from understanding what the middle class is. And if we have an idea of what a middle class is and how it got started, then we can somehow get some handle on what it is we're trying to talk about. In economics, they talk about the point of diminishing returns, which I think means if you make so much money, you can live. If you make a little bit more money, you can live with a little bit more flair. And then after a certain level of income, you're buying yachts and ski machines and all kinds of things that you don't need to survive. And I think that there's a certain kind of way of trying to structure that. I think that I can go on to say, but if you go back to the idea of what's make America great again, I saw recently a poster that said what the income tax rate was at certain years. And if you wanted to go back to the 40s or the 50s or the 60s or whatever time you want to go back to, and you saw the amount of income tax that was being paid by certain people in certain areas, I think you'd actually realize that there was never a time when you had it made, except for a specific kind of person with a specific tint of skin color and so forth that was able to dominate politics and what's going on at that time. The last thing I want to say is that the idea of Citizens United turned politicians into campaigning all the time instead of campaigning towards the end of their tenure after actually serving the country. Now they have to pretty much start campaigning immediately after they get elected. So I think that there's a certain degree of the idea that the corporation is seen as being the same as a citizen that is a challenge to the corrupt side of what we have right now in America. I'll let it go with that.
Okay, Lino.
Thank you. I want to kind of give us a framing that steps back a little bit and kind of looks across history and sees political stuff. I mean, we're all doing that. What I want to look at is the rate at which information flows. Back in the old days, if Newcomb wanted to get to Washington, why he'd get on a horse or he'd send something Pony Express. Now we have the internet, phones, we've had improving technology, and I believe that there's an emergence coming from a political emergence coming just from the fact that information is flowing so fast. Someone steps out of a restaurant with someone on their arm, and there's a picture and it flashes into the media and gets recognized and gets dealt with. I think that's the world we're going to be living in. And the thing that's going to come against it is somebody's going to try to pass a law that says, well, you can't do that. Police can confiscate cameras anytime they want, and this, that, and the other. And so they'll come against our ability to be reporters on the spot. End of my thought. Thank you for listening.
Go ahead, Bob.
It seems to me that I may have read this guy wrong, but I think that what he's talking about is at a very local level, at a very as local as you can possibly get. How do we choose our representatives? What is our system for choosing the first level of representatives that can affect how we live? I think what he's trying to do is to give us a feeling for, not that we can make some kind of global changes in what America is without changing the way that we deal with selecting our mayors, our city councils, our state representatives, etc. And that if we deal with that in a more, I hate to use this word because Chris will just jump down my throat, egalitarian way, that now we're starting to create a foundation, especially if the people who are voting have some system of education so that they know what and why they're doing what they're doing. I'm talking about the voters at a very local level. Then that foundational base can be laid for making decisions from the bottom up rather than the up down. That will possibly, and Chris is right, will possibly be more satisfying and at the same time as productive or more productive than what we seem to be heading into presently. So that's what I gathered from it, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's not what he was saying. So maybe he's really talking about climate change and all the other global issues. But I didn't really read that. So.
Okay. I want to go back to a little bit to the skin in the game idea. That was basically the argument in the 1800s of the slaveholders, that the property owners should be the ones who can vote, because they had the skin in the game. And that was basically a way of preserving their way of life, of being slaveholders, and having slaves work their plantations. That was actually quite prevalent not only before the Civil War, but after, as new states were being established. They wanted to establish them as slaveholding states. So I wouldn't say the idea of having people with more skin in the game is a better way of governing. It can lead to different results, which may or may not be better. But I don't think that's a rationalization for who should be able to vote, whether you have more skin in the game or not. Jason, you're next.
I wanted to get back to what
I had no opinion. But looking
Bob,
at
hello. I wanted to get back to what Bob Kaufman suggested in the comments section, is that we really focus our conversation as to how we choose our elected representatives. And I've been giving this some thought, and there's a duality of threats that we face. If we allow non-citizens the same rights and privileges as citizens, then we cease to have sovereignty as a nation. If a nation cannot control its borders, if a nation doesn't have borders, if we don't control the flow of people, well, one, we invite terrorism and other threats. We do have enemies at the gates, but also a nation that doesn't control its borders or doesn't control who comes and who goes is not sovereign. So we got sovereignty on one hand. That's extremely important. Two, if we allow illegal migrants into the nation, but deny them over time the right to vote, then we're setting up an underclass, and that sows the seed for eventually a revolution or civil war of disenfranchised population of people within our nation that rightfully so complain that they're the underclass. The only way to preserve a nation state's sovereignty and prevent an underclass from forming or a possible civil war or revolution on both sides is to, one, control our borders, and two, when they do come here, rather than worrying about whether or not they have the right to vote, we forcibly deport them, we do what other nations like Israel does. We do not tolerate people that jump the line and come here illegally. And if you poll the immigrant community, the people who have come here legally, who have stood in line patiently, many Mexican Americans who came here lawfully, they are extremely angry at their brothers and sisters who jumped the fence, who jumped the line, who didn't wait their turn, because it penalizes the law-abiding citizens who do follow the processes. And if you're under any delusion that we can just, oh, we're a big country, we can absorb them. Well, I've shown you the gumball video. It's freely available on YouTube. You could look it up, the immigration gumball, argument. And it makes a devastating argument that, no, we cannot we can't just throw open our doors. Our nation, it is a myth. We have always had controlled immigration policies dating back to our very founding. And we had always controlled which nations in Europe kind of sent us our people. And yes, they were racially based, and we had reasons for doing that, maybe not reasons you would agree with, but we have always had, exclusionary immigration policies. You could say, you could make all these arguments, but the fact is that to preserve our sovereignty and to prevent an underclass from forming, we cannot tolerate illegal immigration, and we cannot, and we should not, and we have been allowing non-citizens to vote. And that totally, if we don't have a rules-based system, why are we even having this conversation? We need to have agreed upon laws and rules that govern the integrity of our elections. Otherwise, we have no integrity in our elections. So, yeah.
We do have those rules, Jason.
Political factions, aka, I won't say who, but they end in Democrats, choose to not want to follow those rules or even acknowledge that they exist.
And that's corruption, right? There are various different kinds of corruption, and we certainly tolerate lots more of it than we ought to.
Yes. In our government, we should, by rooting out corruption based upon the rules we already have on the books. Otherwise, what point is it to make new reforms or new rules when we don't even enforce the ones we've got currently? We should start with the ones currently.
We should start by minimizing a lot of the rules we have.
This is the problem. We live in shoulda coulda land. We don't live in shoulda world. We live in the world that actually is. And we could say it should be like this. These are dreamers and idealists. And unfortunately, very rarely do we really look at the hard reality of the implementation and the tertiary and secondary side effects of what policy implementation actually means. It's why people who work in government start off as the most idealistic, and then 10 years into their career, they're some of the most pessimistic, non-idealists you've ever met. They've given up because they see the inertia within government. They see that government never will be and never can be the solution to most of these problems we seek.
Inertia is an attempt to create that balance, checks and balances we talk about. We have a government that was designed 200 years ago to be relatively
powerless,
in favor of the status quo, hard to change. So it has to get way out of line before you can develop enough impetus to overcome that inertia.
If you want to improve the government, and this is not being talked about.
Oh, yeah, this is exactly what we're talking about.
government has to fear the people and not the other way around. The government has to be weaker than the people
The
and not.
people's opinion and the government has to be there. This straight line, no noticeable impact is a serious critique of our government. I can tell you, I'm not nearly as much of a futurist as I'd like to be, but I can tell you, let this go on for another 100 years, and if the government is still there, you will have a revolt.
Won't take
Oh, I
100 years.
Revolting, as the Wizard of Id used to say.
Which is why the government should be weaker. It's too powerful already. We should weaken and shrink our government, not make the monster bigger, because the government,
Balance,
once it becomes
Jason.
too old, it's too powerful.
Has gotten way off. Who's next?
Uh,
Carrie, I believe.
Gary's next.
I think so.
Okay. I just wanted to mention, talking about the influence of money. And I mean, another way that we see this happen is in the way the parties themselves run in selecting their candidates, at least at a national level. I mean, I just kind of just was thinking about this, and we saw, Bernie Sanders basically get screwed over by his party twice. Ron Paul got screwed over by his party. Tulsi Gabbard got screwed over, and so did RFK. Right? This is the machine doing exactly what the guy in the video was saying. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue that that's at the behest of the people who control the purse strings. We can also point to, Kamala Harris's appointment as a mechanism to keep the money flowing, because that was the only way to keep the donations in play. Right? If they had a separate primary and potentially somebody else was there, all of that money donated to them would have probably either been unavailable or have to go back to the donors. So I think we can, I think it's pretty well established that the premise by the person in the video, it plays out pretty much as he said. And I don't know if his responses to it are going to be effective necessarily, but the problem seems pretty clear and obvious to a bunch of folks.
One of the reasons I wanted to show this video is eventually to ask, and have any of these possible solutions been implemented in the last 8 years?
Oh, I've been hearing about campaign finance reform about as long as I've been hearing about immigration reform, and I'm still waiting for either.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, we haven't made much of a dent in either of those.
By design, I would argue.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on the part of the people who have managed to eliminate the feedback links with the general population.
Mm-hmm.
I think you were next, were you, Lynn?
Yes.
Yes, and I experienced just now another kind of indignation about the fairness of the world. I was under the impression that as you raised your hand, your square got moved up to the top row, but in chronological order of your raising your hand. And 3 people raised their hands after me, and my square remained in 4th position. The reason I initially raised my hand, which is gone by the wayside now, is to ask people not to not to use current politics as examples. I was very restive during the contribution of one of our members who kept throwing up straw man enemies and trying to be subtle about it and not succeeding. I think that communication happens better when we don't invite anybody in the conversation to be distracted by an angry reaction to what somebody says. I don't know why speakers try to raise an angry reaction, because it's counterproductive to getting paid attention to. They will be seen, but their comments, their thoughts will not be absorbed by an angry person. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Bob?
Maybe I was wrong in what I said. Did this guy not have a stress on starting at a local basis, trying to create a foundational base and that is more egalitarian and have it grow from the bottom up? Did he not say that? Was that not the inference of what he's saying? If I am right about it, is there anybody would like to discuss that issue? Because we can discuss decisions being made at the federal level all day long, and it's not going to mean jack shit if we can do some. I mean, I should say it's not going to mean much, but if we start at a lower level, will that be difficult? Yes, but a lot less difficult than if we try to start at a federal level. So, but maybe I'm wrong about this. Does anybody want to discuss this at all? Am I
That's
off base?
point, Bob. In trying to prepare for this presentation, I looked at a video where they were suggesting exactly that there was data that suggested that as the states adopted a new method, a new idea, the other states adopted it, and after a while, when they got to be about 50% of the states, then it transitioned to a federal level. And that was the case for women voting. They had a couple of at least another example that I'm not remembering.
Is it possible conceptually that if 50% of the counties in Minnesota adopted a different way of choosing their county representatives and et cetera, that the state might adopt that kind of way if in fact a case could be made that it was more effective and more, I hate to use this word, Chris, fair. But is that conceptually possible? I think it may be. I think are we so skeptical that we just think that we're doomed, or do we think there's some potential for advancement? And if so, what's our idea? I thought this guy had an idea, and I don't hear us talking about it.
If I'm remembering what I read correctly, apparently Australia has been using a form of instant runoff voting for most of the last 100 years. So good ideas do sometimes make their way around. Minneapolis chose to implement a form of instant runoff voting, and then apparently has backed off of that. I'm not quite sure I understand what's going on there.
Does anybody else have any comments about that?
H-Town. Somehow you read.
Ding.
Yeah,
There.
okay.
Am I now in? Okay.
Yeah.
First, Zoom has a new feature that if you have your mic open and it hears noises, it thinks you're talking, and then it takes your hand down. This is a new thing in the last 2 weeks, and it's a pain. So if you put your hand up, be sure to mute your microphone. And then pay attention to the little thing on the bottom of your screen. It says, "You're done talking. I'll take your hand down for you." It gives you 2 seconds to click on it. I had my hand up because my wife has been a Democrat all her life. I was a Republican for many years. The differences in the parties are public and trivial as far as their internal politics. They're and neither of them is good. Rank choice, I did a presentation on voting systems several years ago, and I don't want to do it again. All voting systems can be gamed. A great example of this is the current uproar over the Hugo and Dragon Awards, where groups have set about to push a particular candidate or retard a particular candidate, and it works in if you can go off and probably there was a Nobel Prize awarded for just voting systems. Arrow's theorem is what the prize was for, where he demonstrates that all of these systems can be gamed. There is no good system. Straight majority is probably the least gameable.
Nah, and it has
I
such
said
problems.
it has I'm not saying it has no problem. It has a huge number of problems.
Yep,
But the problems are more obvious
this is true.
than in the fancier systems. There was I had a third point, but I've forgotten what it was. It'll come up again.
Okay,
I
Stan.
found some very interesting, cute little cartoons that explain what possible ways around some of the gaming that can be done with voting. They're relatively quick, but it would probably take 10 minutes to show the two that I wanted.
Speaking of that, do you have any more videos to show? It's 11,
Well,
almost 11:30.
Do you want to keep talking about this, or can I show you a video?
Well, we still have 4 more hands up.
Yep, I know.
I don't care. I'll take mine down.
Well, okay, we'll go on to Lino.
Point, if I may. I've held on to it for a while. I think one of the things that's affecting politics a lot and a lot more in modern times is emotions in politics. You see it on the floor, you see it in TV, you see it in advertising. And so everybody is being pumped up with this chemical fuel in their brains that's affecting, creating narrative that's offensive, facts in politics, lies in politics. All of the narrative that we create is exploding around us, and we're living in it. We're living in a cesspit of information, in my view. In terms of a solution, Bob, to taxes, one of the ones that I propose in my own thinking is, suppose we paid all taxes in at the local level, and then they remitted to the regional level a share, and to the state level a share, and to the federal level a share. And so we just reverse the tax flow and the apportionment of money. So that's my creative idea. Thank you for letting me talk.
Okay, Kerry.
Yeah. Okay. So as far as local examples of this, so I live in Seattle, and there has been kind of a movement of what I would call anti-law enforcement politicians. Now, Republicans don't stand a chance in Seattle, right? So you can't consider that as an alternative. But what I find fascinating is there used to be a thing like a law and order Democrat. And I would think that, boy, everyone I talk to and I see on Nextdoor and things like that are completely upset because there's rampant prostitution and homelessness and gunplay and whatnot. But it seems like they can't get any traction in the primaries. And I assume that is the party itself only backing candidates that have this particular anti-prosecution, anti-law enforcement, anti-prison, setup. So, I mean, it's not just at the national level. I think we can see this also at a local level. And as far as weaponizing anger towards people, I have what I think is a funny example. This was from a meetup group that had a speaker or a presentation that was critical of the Supreme Court and its direction. And this is a sentence from their description. Today's religious right wing and their enablers on the Supreme Court are not just poised to abolish the separation of church and state. They seem determined to repeal all modern progress made by humanity in the past 300 years by repealing the very Enlightenment itself. And I don't know, I read that and it's like, how could somebody draft that with a straight face? I mean, it's like, really? And I'm sure there are a bunch of people there who absolutely bought into that. I mean, but that just seems, beyond hyperbolic to the nth degree.
Yeah. I would agree with that assessment. There was a kernel of truth there, but they went way too far.
Wait, you agree with that, Tom?
I have 2 points to make. I think
Where's
it
the
was
real
Lino excuse me, Jason, please. I think it was Lino who said there's a lot of information out there now. I agree, and maybe it's too much, but one of the problems is that there's a lot of disinformation, and on the web, disinformation travels faster than true information because it tends to pique people's interests and gets their juices flowing. And that's been mathematically shown to be true. So that's a problem with what's going on out there on the web. And I had another point that I was going to mention. Just as Tom had, I forgot what it was. So if I think of it, I'll come back to it.
It'll come back.
Go ahead, David.
As I say, I found these cartoons that I thought did a relatively nice job of analyzing some of the challenges with voting. And because of the way they're done, they tend not to be quite so exciting as some such discussions might be.
Both parties getting more radical, you might say. I mean, it's true. The way I would categorize it, the Republican Party has the MAGA Republicans now, which are kind of extreme, and on their Democratic Party, they have the progressives, and I'd say the liberals are more moderate. The progressives are the ones who talk about defunding the police and that kind of stuff, and there's the same kind of problem over on the Republican side. So there's increasing polarization on both sides.
Queen Lion of the Animal Kingdom.
So this alternative vote sounds like ranked choice voting. Is that ranked choice voting? Is that the same thing, David?
Mostly. Yes. I'd like to show you one more of these.
David, do you have something to say about it?
I like the idea. Any other opinions?
As an election judge, I've seen we've had ranked voting in St. Paul, and people are there's a learning curve on this, and people are confused, and it delays things. when they process voting. But it's confusing to me. That's one of the downsides.
Yeah, I think the most confusing part about it is people don't know how many candidates to vote for, and that's a strategic decision. So you might want to vote for just the one or two or three of them and ranking them. But how you do that can determine final outcomes, which may not necessarily be to your liking. So it is an intellectual exercise that some people just are not used to doing when they vote.
But I can't imagine how they would be any worse off under this than they would have been under first past the post.
This does give third-party candidates a chance, at least to receive votes that people might not give to them because they figure it's a hopeless case.
One last comment. When it's mail-in voting, a lot of things will, there's a lot of problems on a mail-in vote that will disqualify a vote. And so if they mark it wrong because it's more complicated, you're going to lose votes.
Yep.
It just happens.
But they don't have to mail in their vote. They can.
Well, they might have to if they're not going to be around.
That's true.
Yeah, there's people who choose to do a mail-in ballot are taking a risk because a lot of things can go wrong.
Yep. Yeah, I was an election judge too. I agree with that. I don't use mail-in voting. I go down and fill it out. They have early voting in Minneapolis. And
I
if
have to do
spoil your
early
ballot,
voting as well.
if you spoil your ballot, you can get another one.
Yeah, that's true. It's but that's happened at the where you're actually voting.
Yeah.
And you can spoil as many ballots as you want, but that's not the problem. If something passes through the machine, or worse yet, if you mail it in, then you have no clue.
Yep.
And so that's why the gold standard has to be voting at a voting station.
Mm-hmm. Where you ask any questions that aren't clear to you.
Yeah, but the election judges are limited in what they can say. You cannot explain everything to a voter. That's their job, and because it's too easy to put in your feelings. So, especially if you hate something like if you don't do your job right, you can influence the voter and frustrate them, and that's not good.
And you're supposed to do your job right, and the job is structured so that you are aware of where the line is. You can help them with the procedure. You can't help them with what they choose to vote for.
Understood. Yeah, but even attitude, your attitude, because if you're frustrated with ranked votes because you've had to explain it to 10 other individuals, your attitude can influence people. It just shouldn't be that complicated.
H-Tom.
Someone asked me how I would fix the voting in the country, and I said it's easy. You go to your precinct and you get your ballot and you vote, and the votes are collected in a box. Polls close. The election judges and the poll workers open the box, shuffle the ballots around so we don't know who was on top as being the last one in. They count the ballots. They publish the count. They put the ballots back in the box, seal the box. The box goes to the local jail and is held there until the court orders them destroyed or recounted. As the precincts do their counts, the reporters run around and gather all the numbers, add them up, and a whole lot of the opportunities for playing with ballot counts disappear because nobody has access to the ballots other than the precinct. There are no strange boxes of ballots appearing or boxes disappearing. They were right there. They were counted.
They probably should be counted twice, and if it doesn't agree, a third time.
You could count them 2 times or 3 times. They are then sealed in the box.
Yep.
And then, and only then, do they leave the precinct to go off to secure storage. And recount consists of taking precinct 19B out of storage and counting it and comparing it to the results the election judges made. If there's a difference, we need an explanation. But it's a tiny little localized difference. It might be an off by 1 error, but it's not going to be an off by 10,000 error because there were not 10,000 people in the precinct. That's all this conglomerating them. I really think I was an election judge back in the 60s. Is an attempt to find ways to allow manipulation after the election.
Carol.
Sorry.
You're muted, Carol.
I think she's working on it.
David, do you have more videos?
No. Well, I mean,
No.
I have lots more, but I don't have a lot that
you intend to show.
I'm not worried about pushing this any farther than I have.
Okay. Then I would like to go back to a suggestion that I almost made, but I took my hand down when it was suggested that you had more videos. I've been thinking a lot about this notion of people having skin in the game. And I think there is a way to make an enormous improvement that basically has nothing to do with voting. And that is that many people buy stock in companies. And they hope to get returns on that stock, and they possibly hope to influence push what that company is doing with, in the economy. If we were to change the law such that people who got stock in companies were required to hold it for at least a year, not to sell it, no day trade, you're required to hold stock in the company for at least a year. All of a sudden, everybody with stock in a company has skin in the game economically. They have a real interest in how that company is doing long term, not short term, not this order.
Mm-hmm.
And you start getting companies that are looking at maximizing long-term profits as opposed to day trading. I think this would do an enormous amount for having a lot of people a lot of citizens having skin in the game.
I'm assuming that you would not allow puts and calls in the um, futures trading in stocks either, then?
No,
Warren,
The thing about futures trading is that that allows people to hedge their investment.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And we don't really want people hedging their investments.
that's important
We
for
want,
farmers, actually.
we
Yeah.
want people investing in something that they believe in. And
Farmers normally do invest in something that they believe in. And it's a very risky
Mm-hmm.
occupation because if the rain doesn't come at the right time, you're pretty,
Or too much comes.
yep.
That's why they need to hedge on those commodities.
Can I go then? No, then, because I'll follow up on you, Carol, because we did have a proposal early, many years ago, I think it was when George Bush won, to invest Social Security into the market. And
Mm-hmm.
everyone was saying, oh, that's a terrible idea. But actually, if you look at the numbers now, people would be wealthy, have a wealth, Social Security would be wealthy.
Yep.
But people were a lot of people are just anti-capitalism, so they didn't want to do that. I just wanted to mention one thing about the voting, and a long time ago it was all counted by hand, but now, fortunately, at least in Ramsey County, it's counted electronically. There is a paper ballot, which is great, because you can always go back to the paper ballot, but they're electronically recorded, and then those devices that are recorded on are transported back to Ramsey County, where they're all collected, and the chips are taken out, and they do
No.
the analysis.
Publish it at the precinct.
It is published at the precinct.
Yeah.
We put it on the door.
Before they take them downtown.
Yeah, it is. It
Yeah.
is. We print out we print
that's
an
how
output and put it on the window. It's published, so
Yeah.
people can see what the precinct did. Yeah, and it's just a print off from the machine. Of course,
Cool, yeah.
if there's shenanigans with the machine, everything's wrong, and I doubt that that's true.
Well, it can easily be shenanigans with the machine.
There are lots of ways. That's why I want them counted by hand.
Well, you can count
Well,
them
you
by
need the
hand as
right
well.
kinds of machines too.
You can count them by hand as well, but I wouldn't want the precinct workers to be doing that. They'd be there for 2 days at the precinct for 2 days. It's not gonna. It can't happen. I mean, you can't count these things by hand.
Precincts are too big, perhaps.
It's a question of cost. In Hennepin County, in Minneapolis, they're already working 16-hour days just to get it done with the machine. It would indeed make it a longer day.
Well, make it impossible. It would make it.
Why does it? I do not understand how it takes so long. I've got an 8.5 by 17 cardboard with marks on both sides. I feed it into the slot. The machine takes an image of both sides, determines which boxes are marked,
Right.
adds totals to the correct places, or says, this ballot has I can't decide what this ballot is doing. You look at it, boss. Boom, 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 boom.
What are you saying? What are you talking about? So what's the problem? I don't understand.
He's
You don't
talking
want them counted by a
simplified
machine?
machine.
You don't want them counted by a machine?
I
Or you
I
do want
have
them counted?
the idea that it's going to take 2 days for the precinct workers to count them. My objection is to taking the uncounted ballots and transporting them to a central facility. I want someone who wants to play with this to have to go out and play in 10,000 precincts rather than in 2 central counting stations.
They want it decentralized.
I remember the good Lord, what was his name? Daley in Chicago. They had these big monstrous machines that made marks on rolls of paper. And they were wonderfully secure until somebody actually followed the rolls of paper and they went to the warehouse and the truck stopped and the rolls of paper were taken out and different rolls of paper were put in and then they went off to be counted. And the mayor won. Gee, duh. And taking the boxes is just a different way of doing that. We have 197 boxes of ballots here to count. Did we count 197 or was there 198 or 196? Count them in the precinct, publish the numbers, send them off, then to be held for a recount.
Okay.
Anyway.
I think I'm next. I want to respond to something Carol was saying about long-term investments. We currently do have a mechanism for that. The long-term capital gains rate is lower than the short-term capital gains tax rate.
Yes.
And that's 1 year, makes it long-term. There's a movement to eliminate that, to make the long-term capital gains tax rate as high as the others. So that would tend to decrease this idea of investing for the long term. So that's maybe to me not such a good idea. The idea that was also brought up about investing Social Security in the stock market, over the long term, that's a good idea. However, people who are taking Social Security don't necessarily have a long-term horizon to look at. And I can understand why they'd be looking for a guaranteed source of income versus possible high returns that they may or may not be able to count on. So there's pros and cons to that idea also. Lynn, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to hopefully quickly address this idea of hand-counted ballots versus machine-counted ballots. It is possible to create templates and fasten them to a table in such a way that you can put the ballot under the template and see who's been voted for. You don't have to run your eyes over each ballot. There's ways to streamline hand counting of ballots, and this would undoubtedly be done were we to implement hand counting. It also occurs to me that perhaps you want to bring in people who haven't been working all day to do that hand counting. And there was something else I wanted to say about this idea of hand counting. I guess just to reinforce what someone's already said, that in Minneapolis, the machine counted tallies are posted for any reporter who happens to wander by the precinct and look where it's posted on the window so that it can be read from the outside. As soon as the machine, the computer, comes up with a tally, that's printed out and posted.
Okay, Stan.
I think that one of the strategies that I'm gonna jump into this with some current information or concepts or
We'll try to keep
problems.
it brief, please.
Uh, the Trump people, because they were not able to take the steal of the election last time, have been working very hard to try to keep the steal going their way this time. I know that Steve Bannon and some of the people that are aligned with Trump have arranged for electors in specific states and counties to deny the votes and to take whatever actions they can to eliminate the fairness of elections in those counties. And I think that we should be taking that threat more seriously. That's all I'm going to say.
And if you think First Past the Post has problems with elections, you should see what happens if there's a tie or it has to go to the Congress to decide.
Oh,
Then it really gets messy.
We had one other hand up, but that dropped down. I see Lynn's hand is still up. I don't know if she had finished or not.
I finished. I got distracted. Sorry.
Okay, Warren, go ahead.
Yeah, just remember Chad. That's all.
Huh.
We don't want Chad.
Okay. All right, I think that concludes it. It's 5 after 12. So any last words, David? Determine what kind of medical care you get, or have corporate bean counters determine what kind of medical care you get. I don't think that's an improvement, having the corporations do that.
Corporations are a mini democracy in and of itself because they have to listen to shareholders. And oftentimes,
What?
I mean, yeah, that's the radical shift we've seen in the 20th century with corporations in the private sector, is that they put shareholders in the.
See how the management can select their shareholders.
Oh, yes, we can argue all day about that, but it used to be that corporations would do what's in the best interest of their employees. Now they've put their shareholders front and center in terms of their priorities. So we can all agree upon that. But remember, shareholders, if you want, instead of rather than bitching and complaining and whining that corporations make bad choices, buy shares in the companies that you don't agree with where they're going, and then you will have a vote, a say in the direction of what they do. What your money's mouth is, back up your words with actions.
Most of the people who are adversely affected can't afford to buy shares in those companies.
Disney has lost over 50% of its share price in the last couple of years. It's down to like less than $100 a share, I want to say. I mean, it's never been better to buy in because the price has never been lower. If they say buy low, sell high, I mean, nobody's preventing you from buying a share of this or that stock. And then you'll get a prospectus and they'll legally have to make disclosures to you. And then you'll have an insider's view as to what's really going on.
A lot of people don't even have an extra $100 lying around to buy a share.
Work harder. I mean, most of the world's problems.
Okay.
I have.
H-Tom, go ahead.
I have never noticed a company that I own shares in paying any attention to anything I had to say about anything. I have never been more ignored in my life.
What are we talking about with skin in the game? You know, if you want skin in the game, you've got to buy stock in a company. That won't make you a major.
No, you have to buy a lot of shares in a company. One share they pay no. Well, if the company only has 3 shares, yes, then owning one will get you some attention. But if you have 100,000 shares and you have 10, they don't care. They actually can't. There are too many shareholders for them to listen to any of them.
You are making a good point, and nobody has ever talked about the influence of large conglomerates like BlackRock's influence on these large mega corporations. If that's something we want to talk about at a future date, that would make a very good topic about companies like BlackRock and other large investing businesses that have an undue influence on these corporations and why they're doing some of the evil things that they're doing. We could look at the roots and the fundamentals of that, which I'm not an expert, but I've watched documentaries and I feel fundamentally well versed enough to talk about in some measure. BlackRock, look it up.
Okay, we need to bring this to a close. David, what's coming up next week? Or do you have a summary of what we just talked about first?
I don't really have a good summary. It's a challenge. It's complicated. There are some interesting possibilities for ways to improve the situation. I don't expect to see anything change in the near future, unless this is a lot less close election than it presently appears to be. As far as next week, I think Carol's doing a presentation for us on manufacturing in microgravity. Is that right, Carol?
Carol, you can't hear you. You're muted.
I am doing a presentation, which you can look up, on the past, present, and future of microgravity manufacturing.
And then the week after that, Jason, I believe you're doing something on, is it nuclear weapons?
No, my next presentation is on college and universities and the post-secondary.
Right.
I did the primary.
Okay, we'd like to get summaries of those up on the meetup site.
I mean, that's pretty much it.
If we could get summaries of those.
And then you're doing one after that, right, Tom?
Yes, I was asked, based on my last presentation, to do a presentation on cliodynamics.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about extending longevity.
I was going to, but that was before the last presentation, and people wanted to hear about cliodynamics. So I'm going to do cliodynamics, and then end of the year or whenever my next one, I'll talk about life extension.
Okay. I've got it posted wrong then. We can change it.
The Zoom for Dummies book there's only been one edition. Zoom itself has been updated a couple of times, but I know some power Zoom users who say it's the best book available for it. And the changes are mostly internal, and they've all recommended going to Half Price Books.
I've got the latest breaking research on immortality studies and human longevity studies. I have a plethora of data I should send to you, Tom, if you're interested. because I follow that quite closely, being associated with the cryonics group and
Mhm.
community. So let me know if you're interested in that, Tom.
Yeah, if you
Mhm.
could just send me some references, that would be good.
I can
Yeah.
certainly do.
Immortality if you live to see it.
Well,
I
that's one thing that Elon Musk is looking forward to. He's thinking we're approaching extending life by about a year every year. He
yeah
wants to get to that point so that he can live forever.
That's called
yeah
escape velocity.
Yeah.
escape velocity for age. Yeah. I don't know if I want that or not. When I look around the world, I sometimes think I was blessed when I was born and grew up, and it's just going to be downhill from now on.
You've got to remember that we're in the best position in the world in terms of affluent countries.
Oh, yeah.
The ethics of our um, foreign policy needs needs some examination.
First, you have to find it.
Right. Thanks for coming.
Yep.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody.
Very
I